guys, welcome to the video. My name is Farron and today we're going to be mastering the knit stitches for your domestic sewing machine. So if you don't have a serger, no problem. I'm going to show you the most common stitches for knits. And then I'm also going to show you some new ways that you can sew your knits that you probably didn't even think about. Let's get into it. So this is my fashion studio. My name is Farron. It has a great presence, right? Look at the color. You can't miss this sewing machine. This one, however, you're just like, okay, it's Swiss. It's metal, an old model. I really do feel like a salesperson, but we're not doing that today. You have a domestic sewing machine. That's fantastic. And you want to sew some knits. How are you going to do that? And where do you start first? Even if you have a very inexpensive sewing machine, you will most definitely have a knit stretch stitch of some sort. Even with my little Janome, I have an option for a stretch stitch. There's only a few, but from the few, these are really just the basic ones that you're going to need to know. Before you start setting up your sewing machine, you need to make sure you have a ballpoint needle in your sewing machine. The gauge of the needle will have to match. So if you're using a fine knit, you're going to need a smaller number, a 9, a 10, 11. If you're using any sort of like medium weight, then you want a 12 or 14 ballpoint. The ballpoint needle doesn't pierce through the fibers like it does for other woven fabrics. What it does is it kind of moves the loops aside in order for you to stitch and not break your knit. The next thing you're going to have to check on your sewing machine is the presser foot pressure. If your presser foot pushes too hard on the knit, then it could stretch your knit a bit too much. And that's not something that you want to do, right? You want to feed your knit through your sewing machine as easily as possible without stretching. Some people, they say stretch your knit while sewing. I don't always agree with that, because what you could do is you could permanently stretch out your fabric and then it won't recover the same way. That's a tip. And where you can find your presser foot pressure is right near the uptake lever. So take a look at your machine and take a look at the manual. It should suggest what kind of pressure your presser foot should be for knits. So there's that. The other most important thing that you're going to have to make sure before you get to stitching is to check your presser foot. Are you using the correct presser foot for the stitch that you're going to be using on your knit? If you're having any problems with your knit skipping stitches, I have a little hack for you. This hole is a bit too big, so it's causing your stitches to skip. Take some tape, okay? It doesn't have to be painter's tape. It can be any tape you want. Just put that on the bottom, cut some of that off around your presser foot. Basically, what you're trying to do is just close this hole so it doesn't pick up the fabric. Put on your presser foot as per usual. Poke your needle through. This will stop the knit from skipping stitches. All right, guys, let's get on to the most common stitches and then we can work our way onto some of the new techniques or the new stitches that I use on my knits. Okay, let's start from the beginning. There are 5 most common stitches used for stretch knits, and one of them being the zigzag. The zigzag can be used in many different functions, and it is a great option for resembling a serger. The next one would be this one that kind of looks like a straight stitch, but it repeats 3 times. It does resemble a straight stitch, but it goes back. So it takes 2 stitches forward and then 1 back to give that extra stretch. Because if you use a regular stitch, most likely if your knit stretches, it will pop the stitches and you don't want that. This is why we need a stretch stitch when you're sewing. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're moving forward. The third stitch that is a good possibility is this one that kind of looks like a lightning bolt. And it is a very great option for when you want a straight stitch, but you need more stretch. The fourth option would be the 3-point zigzag. It's mainly used for lingerie and underwear and that sort of thing when you're stitching on your elastics and stuff. And it's a bit more decorative, but you can use it on your seam allowances. Totally fine. The last option, which some people do like, is a great option for stable knits and some like moderate stretch knits. I don't personally like this stitch for the stretchable fabrics because it has a tunneling effect, which you can see here in this little sample that I did. It didn't work out very well for my fine knitted fabrics, so I wouldn't really choose this one. Let's get on to doing a stretch test, and I'll show you how to do one right now. Get a piece of your fabric, cut in the vertical stretch that is, I don't know, like 2 inches wide by 10 inches long. Get your ruler. We have our ruler, we have our fabric, we have our stitch that we want to pick for our knit. I'm gonna do the zigzag. We're gonna test it out. Test out the zigzag. Okay, what you're going to have to do when you're putting your fabric through the machine, you have to remember not to push your fabric or stretch your fabric. Just sort of guide it through your presser foot really nicely. And sometimes stitches go front and then they go behind, right? So you don't want to be pulling or stretching or doing any of that to your knit because you could stretch it out. That's a pro tip. So what you're going to do is exactly like the pick and knit rule. Taking your knit at the beginning of the ruler and then picking a point at the 10 inches mark right here, right where your stitches are, and then pull your stitches to see how far they stretch. This stretches 30%. That's not bad. And take a look at the recovery rate. I mean, the recovery of your fabric and the stitch look actually pretty good. Like there's no major lumps or fabric being pulled out. This is number 2. This is 12.5. And the recovery, not bad. This is 13.5. Not bad. This is 12.5. And the recovery is not the best. All right, so you've done your stretch test. Amazing. How did it go? Now that you've done your stretch test, these stitches will determine what stitch is best for the area for your project. You match your seam to the stitch. Now let's move on to some of the stitches that I personally like, and they might be even new to you. And one of them being this kind of like argyle shape. It's like a bunch of diamonds. This stitch is really good for power knits, something that is like a mesh if you're making lingerie or underwear or something of that sort. I find that it is very good, very stretchable, and it's also kind of decorative. I use it to stitch on top of a seam. It kind of looks like a cover stitch machine. So you can try that out for yourself if you like it. Okay, a seam that I have used on a jersey before, I call it the fake flat fell. And what I did was stitched on top to make it kind of decorative and almost of a design detail. On one side it looks like a clean finish, and on the other side I just top stitched it kind of like a flat fell. But I left this raw edge because I liked the look of the linen personally. This knit is not so stretchy. On the vertical seam, it's almost like a stable knit. This seam might not always be the best for your project, but I thought I would share it because it's kind of cool and it's a bit different. Another seam that you may not think of ever using for knits is a French seam. And I used it for the shoulder seam as well as the armhole. This kind of gives it that little bit higher end look because French seaming does take some time. And especially if you're using a stretch stitch. This could be a good alternative for stabilizing your shoulder, because we all know that when you're making a t-shirt, you have to stabilize the shoulder. And if you stay tuned, next week, we're going to be doing how to sew a t-shirt from start to finish. So don't forget to ring the bell, subscribe to the channel. I just wanted to share those things. Oh wait, one more stitch that I really like using. It is this other decorative stitch that kind of looks like a crisscross, like it's a straight stitch on one side and then it's an X on the other. I was really surprised. It looks super cute. It's probably a stitch that you wouldn't normally think of using. That is everything that I possibly know about knit stitches. What sort of stitches do you, seriously? What is your favorite stitch that you like using on knits? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. If any of these stitches were new to you, or seams or whatever, I would also love to hear that too. That's it for me today, guys. Don't forget to ring the bell, and I'm gonna see you next week. I literally just went from like, these are all my seams that I like doing. Okay, that's it, bye. And this would, yeah. Maybe I need some like gel for this piece of hair that just keeps sticking out.